Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in, and thank you to the Exhibit Columbus team for organizing the series and for the opportunity to share a little more about the design process behind our installation window dressing, which is currently on display at the Commons in downtown Columbus. A lot of my work is interested in thinking about the shelf life of buildings and building materials, and in particular in how works of architecture from the recent past are maintained and reevaluated over time. And so our project for the Commons began with a deep dive into the recent history of this block of Washington Street, where we worked with Tricia Gilson at the Columbus, Indiana Architectural Archives to find historic photographs, drawings, and news clippings of both the Cutter Kim building that occupies the site today, as well as an earlier building that came before it, namely the Commons and Courthouse Center by Cesar Pelli and Norma Merrick-Sklarick for Gruen Associates, which was completed in 1973 and demolished in 2008. Even though the original Commons is no longer standing today, it is still widely remembered by Columbus residents for two things: its iconic mirrored glass facade that reflected the activities along the sidewalk, as well as the events that took place within this beloved public interior, from high school proms and cabaret nights to ping pong tournaments and election events. And so we realized very quickly that whatever we proposed for the site would be in dialogue with this context. And so we wanted to create an installation that would allow us to look backwards and forwards at the same time, both to reconstruct a piece of this rich history that is now partially erased, but also to speculate on the ways in which the Commons speaks to a larger debate around the fate of late modern mirrored glass buildings from the 1960s and 70s, many of which are approaching a point where they're in need of repair and replacement. And so ultimately our project was interested in adding yet another layer to the Commons facade that would allow us to look a little closer at the social and the performative function of the architectural surface as a means of separating inside and outside, private and public, commercial and civic. So we started to look into the material history of mirrored glass, both its early applications within the building industry, as well as other material innovations that were taking place around the same time, where these highly specialized production methods developed in the aerospace industry were being adopted for commercial applications. Through this research, we became very interested in Mylar Film, which is another quintessentially 20th century material whose versatility provided us with a way to explore some of the effects of mirrored glass through a different lens. Mylar is a metallized polyester film that was first used on NASA's early Echo balloon satellites, where it was valued for its high tensile strength and its negligible weight. During the post-war years, Mylar was rebranded for the commercial market by companies like DuPont, where it was introduced to the public as a glamorous yet very affordable miracle material with these endless applications and superior physical properties. This perception of Mylar's versatility remains true today, where it is still used for a wide range of familiar products, from DIY forms of solar control like window films and windshield reflectors, to more frivolous applications like party balloons and tinsel, all of which continue to reinforce this idea of Mylar as something that is cheap and disposable. Our interest in Mylar also stems from a larger body of work that I'm currently involved in that looks at the afterlife of 20th century man-made materials that were once branded as a solution to material scarcity, but today have these very problematic footprints in the waste processing industry. And Mylar is a great example of this. Due to its lightweight and its composite material makeup, it's extremely unprofitable to recycle. And so a lot of it ends up in landfills or as dead stock in the back corners of recycling centers. And so we were interested in thinking about how we might start to bring a different kind of visibility to this very commonplace material, but one that is so often relegated to the background. And so we began working with the Construction and Demolition Waste Recycling Center in Philadelphia to source pre-consumer Mylar products for the project, which often takes the form of surplus rolls of Mylar film from the food packaging industry. So here you can see our collaborator, Billy Dufala, who is one of the founders of an artist in residence program called RARE that operates out of the site, and he's helping us prepare a roll of material, which we ended up using for over 50% of our project. From there, we started thinking about how we might use Mylar as a medium for exploring a lightweight architecture of surface and effects, one that is able to start to break down the seamless curtain wall facade that currently occupies the commons, and to present it as a more playful and interactive surface that is lightweight, low-tech, hairy, ephemeral, and able to capture changes in its surrounding context. For the assembly logic of this temporary facade, we look to much more conventional construction systems like wood shingles and asphalt roofing, where layers and layers of material are overlapped repeatedly to create a thickened skin. But here, the system is reimagined as a series of lightweight panels that are able to register these subtle changes in its surrounding atmosphere, from wind speeds to passing traffic to changing lighting conditions. To get to this point, we created a lot of prototypes in our studio at Northeastern, where we tested different grades of Mylar, different ways of cutting it, as well as many options for an adhesive substrate that would allow us to attach this assembly to an existing facade. Throughout this process, we became really intrigued by the idea of a handmade facade. And so we began to think through what it would mean to use a highly engineered but low-cost material like Mylar to create a handcrafted and very labor-intensive surface, and to do this at the scale of a building. And so in many ways, our project also learned a lot from the work of a long lineage of fiber artists and textile designers whose practices walk the line between artisanal craft and mass production. At the same time, we were also interested in developing a custom workflow that reflected some of the constraints behind the project brief, which was to create a temporary installation that would be up for 3 months that could be assembled off-site. And so very early on, we decided to forego any structural components within the design and to focus our efforts on developing a three-dimensional cladding system that could be fabricated as a series of modular panels that could be stacked, shipped, and applied like a decal to the commons facade. Another aspect of scaling up meant finding a way to cut the many thousands of pieces of Mylar that we needed to cover a 40-foot section of the commons. And after exploring a number of digital fabrication options that were available to us at Northeastern, we quickly realized that we needed to look to a different scale of production, which led us to die cutting, which is a technique that is used extensively in the packaging industry, where custom dies are used to stamp out profiles on large stacks of material. And so we ended up working with a fantastic machine shop in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to create a set of 9 custom dies for the project, which allowed us to mass produce a large quantity of Mylar shingles that varied in size, profile, and texture, all within a very short amount of time and to a relatively high degree of precision. From there, we worked with an incredible team of Northeastern students over a 2-week period to compose and assemble these prefabricated shingles into a series of unique panels, each one of which was carefully assembled by hand. Here you can see Bella, who is one of the lead designers on the project, putting the finishing touches on one of the more intricate panels within the set. These are some of the templates that we created to describe the layout of each panel and how they fit together within the overall composition of the facade. Once each panel was completed, we ran them through a cold roll laminator, which gave them a clear coating that protected the shingles during transportation and install. At the end of this 2-week period, we ended up making just under 100 panels that we were able to fit inside a single flat-screen TV box that we shipped to our installers in Columbus. After arriving in Columbus, we worked with a team of really talented vinyl installers from Fast Signs to mount our panels to the commons facade. Here you can see our team on site during the first day of install. And one of the most exciting aspects of working on this project has really been the many conversations that we've had throughout the past months with vinyl companies vehicle wrappers, adhesive specialists, and window cleaners, all of whom has given us a new understanding of the amount of skill and labor that's involved in the maintenance of the architectural surface. And finally, here you can see an image of the finished installation. The piece occupies 4 bays of the Commons facade located between the 2 entrances on Washington Street. The scale and the resolution of the project changes as you approach it from different vantage points. So as you're walking next to it, you're able to make out the composition of the different Mylar profiles and textures. When you get up close to it, you can start to catch these fragmented glimpses of your own reflection. And when you move away and are across the street, your attention is shifted to the upper half of the facade, which for us serves as a kind of tribute to the iconic photographs of late modern buildings by photographers like Wayne Thom, where the movement of clouds is such an integral part of these buildings. Here's a short video that gives you a sense of how the facade is activated in the breeze. Depending on the time of day and the weather conditions, the piece can take on a very different appearance. Sometimes it's very flat and still, and you can barely make out the Mylar profiles. Other times it's extremely animated and very three-dimensional. And to end, I'd like to share these 2 images of the project at dusk, where you can see how the facade begins to take on the colors of the sunset. And I just want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to our wonderful photographer Tad at Exhibit Columbus for returning to the Commons over and over again over the past weeks in order to capture the project in all of its different variations. And finally, I would also like to take a minute to thank everyone who has been involved in this project throughout the past year, and to really emphasize that the work that we're able to share today cannot be understood in isolation, but is really shaped by many hands and perspectives, from the work of the Exhibit Columbus curators to set the scene for our work, to the skills and expertise of our fabricators and material consultants, and last but not least, to the very dedicated team of students who helped make all of this possible. Thank you.